Dialectical Journal Unit 2 by Taylor Madison. In this video, I will be covering Everyday Use by Alice Walker, Spunk by Zora Neale Hurston, and Sonny's Blues by James Baldwin. Everyday Use, quote of interest. She used to read to us without pity, forcing words, lies, other folks' habits, whole lives upon us too, sitting trapped and ignorant underneath her voice. She washed us in a river of make-believe, burned us with a lot of knowledge we didn't necessarily need to know, pressed us to her with the serious way she read, to shove us away at just the moment like dimwits we seemed about to understand. Page 655. Miss Johnson, the narrator of the story, was not educated beyond second grade, so she does not understand why books are important. She believes that type of knowledge is superfluous because it has not been necessary in her life. She prides herself in being capable of completing the duties of a man rather than being able to read. Thus she reveals her opinion on education. She seems to dislike that Dee has embraced the role of a modern woman. She likes learning and she is not ashamed of her ability. Miss Johnson believes that stories are irrelevant because they are not real. Her main objection is that she fears Dee will begin living in a world of fantasy. Her one-sided perspective is the reason she has not evolved with the times. Quote of interest. You ought to try to make something of yourself too, Maggie. It's really a new day for us, but from the way you and Mama still live, you'd never know it. Page 660. Dee's advice to Maggie was surprising to me because throughout the short story she seemed to feel humiliated by Maggie's presence. She was scornful of her burns and her lack of self-confidence. She even insulted her by saying that she would probably do something useful with the quilts instead of hanging them as decoration. Maggie seems to do everything exactly the opposite of how Dee does things. This vast difference in personality has caused Maggie to be afraid of Dee, but at the end of Dee's visit she encourages Maggie to venture out into the world of the unknown. Dee had never seemed like a big sister to Maggie, but the camaraderie she felt in that moment made her smile and relax for the first time. This shift in their relationship happened suddenly and was unexpected by the reader. Spunk, quote of interest. Now Joe knew his wife had passed that way. He knew that the men lounging in that general store had seen her. Moreover, he knew that the men knew he knew. Page 357. After reading this section, I had to stop and think about why Joe would want the truth to be hidden. It seemed to me that they were basically lying to each other and to themselves by denying the obvious. Why was it so unacceptable to talk about the affair that was clearly taking place? This action spoke loudly to the values of the time. The men were so concerned with keeping up appearances that they were willing to sacrifice honesty. It must not have bothered them because it was as if they all had an unspoken agreement. By pretending that the affair was not happening, Joe was showing how much it bothered him. Instead of talking about it, he just went out to the woods to fight with Spunk. Quote of interest. Know what I think? Joe was a braver man than Spunk. Look at what he done. Took a razor and went out to fight a man he knowed toted a gun. Page 359. Walter, the man who made this comment, had a dramatic shift in opinion during the course of the short story. In the beginning, he said he liked Spunk because he was not scared of anything. Then, when he started thinking about how Joe went into the woods with only a knife, he realized that Joe was even more brave than Spunk. Spunk may not have been scared, but Joe overcame the fear and confronted him anyway. This was far more courageous, so Walter amended his previous statement. Walter serves as the voice of the townsmen, as well as a chorus for the audience. He presents a point of view that they may or may not agree with. Either way, he forces them to reevaluate their previous assumptions. Sonny's Blues, quote of interest. He turned back to the window, looking out. All that hatred down there, he said. All that hatred and misery and love. It's a wonder it doesn't blow the avenue apart. Page 276. Sonny's struggle was not uncommon. Many African Americans during the 1960s and 1970s faced the same repression and had to fight against the misery that slowly overcame them. Music was Sonny's one coping mechanism other than drugs, so he allowed it to consume his life. It was the only time that he felt happy, successful, and appreciated. This quote provided an honest look into Sonny's need for escape. He could not bear to wake up every morning and feel the hatred and misery, so he became addicted to the calm, easy feeling that heroin provided. Quote of interest. All I know about music is that not many people ever really hear it, and even then, on the rare occasions when something opens within and the music enters, what we mainly hear or hear corroborated are personal, private, vanishing evocations. But the man who creates the music is hearing something else, is dealing with the roar rising from the void and imposing order on it as it hits the air. What it evokes in him, then, is of another order, more terrible because it has no words, and triumphant too for the same reason. And his triumph, when he triumphs, is ours. Page 277. The narrator has a revelation while watching Sonny perform at the nightclub. He sees for the first time the effect that music has on his brother, the audience, and himself. He sees that Sonny becomes a different person when he is playing the piano. The pain and suffering is gone from his face and he looks at ease. The narrator describes, upon arriving at the club, that he is aware of the fact that he has crossed into Sonny's territory. Usually Sonny is the guest, but not when he is performing. This passage beautifully recounted the triumph that filled the void in Sonny and his brother's lives.